hold on. Let's see if this works. Oh, you gotta be fucking fine. Whatever. Don't care. Let's learn about steak off of our.
Today we're making the classic French steak au poivre. And if you want to make a great steak au poivre, you must start with a great stock. So before we get into the steak, we must first make the stock. So let's jump right into it. So I've got a little hotel pan here. You can use a sheet tray, whatever you like. I've got the oven preheated to 450 degrees. And I've got some beef bones and some oxtail. These are nice cheap cuts. The oxtail has some meat and some bone marrow, and that's gonna add a ton of flavor. The bones obviously have bone and bone marrow. So I'm gonna get them all in here. Whatever tough cuts that are cheap can be used here, but this was what was available at the store today. Just gonna add a little bit of tomato paste. Get these guys nicely coated in some of that tomato. It's gonna give it a nice depth, rich flavor for our steak sauce. And then just a little salt. We don't wanna go too crazy because this whole stock's gonna reduce down a lot. So it'll concentrate the salt. If you add too much salt, it might become salty at the end. As we season through stages, just be careful. This is gonna go into the oven. I'm just gonna roast it on 450 degrees until they all get nice and brown. Now it's pretty obvious a good steak au poivre requires a good steak. My steak of choice for this recipe is a filet mignon. Right here I have a beautiful prime piece of filet mignon. It's nice and thick. It's not like a thin little piece. This is a real nice steakhouse piece of beef. And now one of the keys to this recipe is developing a good sear for the pan to make the pan sauce. And we're adding a ton of peppercorn. So if we add salt and peppercorn, there might be an uneven distribution of either of those two ingredients. So one thing to do now, especially if you have some time, if we're making beef stock, if you're thinking ahead, we're gonna salt this thing now. Allow that salt to penetrate it so that we don't need to put a crust of salt on top. We can put a crust of pepper. Again, you can salt it before you're going to cook it, but you might just run the risk of having a lot of that salt fall off or the peppercorn fall off. So by salting it now, we're gonna allow it time while the stock cooks for the salt to penetrate, and then all we need to do is hit it with pepper. So I'm just gonna get it well seasoned. It's a really big, thick piece of steak, so I wanna make sure I get it.
Jackass. Any piece of meat that big is bound to have almost all the seasoning fall off of it. Just saying.
Really well coated. Now, this is gonna go in the refrigerator uncovered for a day, day and a half to dry out. Here's one that's been in the fridge drying out. Can you see the difference? In this one, the moisture is sort of released. It's dried out a bit. It's concentrated almost like a dry age. This still has moisture in it. That salt's gonna pull the moisture out. The moisture is gonna get reabsorbed back into the steak and seasoned all the way through, which is what happened with this. So this one goes into the fridge uncovered. This one's ready to go, but since we've got some time while the stock gets going, I'm just gonna pop this back in the fridge until we're ready to use it. That's gonna get a really good sear. After about 30 minutes or so, I'm gonna take the bones out. I'm gonna give them a rotate just so we can get some nice color development on all sides. And then I'm gonna pop that back in the oven. And after about an hour or so, they should be all nicely caramelized all the way around. I'm gonna get a Dutch oven on the stove, and then I'm gonna transfer the bones and the oxtails into the Dutch oven, and I'm gonna fill it up with water. Fill it up all the way, but you wanna be mindful to leave some space up at the top because you're gonna be adding some vegetables in later, and you don't wanna displace the water. Now bring it up to a simmer. Now, while that stock comes up to a simmer, now we can roast the vegetable. I've got some of my fresh garlic. If you watched my last gnocchi video, we talk about fresh garlic. So this garlic has a little bit of its stem on. Throw that right in there. I'm gonna split the clove of garlic in half. See, that's that beautiful hard neck garlic. Big cloves in one sort of circle around the stem. This goes into the pan. Some celery, some carrots, and all of these things can be cut into a rough dice. I'm gonna make a quicker stock than normally, so I just wanna cut them a bit smaller than normal. Then with the onion, I'm just gonna cut it into these little wedges. Then I'm gonna get all of that into the hotel pan, coat it with some of that tomato paste, a little bit of salt, and get it all mixed up. And we're gonna pop this into that same oven and just roast it the same. We just wanna get a nice kind of caramelization developed on these vegetables. Now get them into the oven and we can check on our broth, which is coming up to a simmer. And as it does, all these particles rise up and it's this scum that forms on the top, which you can start to skim off. But I walked away and then it started to boil. And as you can see, once it boils, it sort of redistributes that into the stock, which isn't exactly what you want. You want it to simmer, but it is going to be okay. I'm going to turn the heat down low right away and start skimming away any of that foamy scum off the top of the broth and just discard it into a little bowl. Now it's nice and clean and the vegetables should be fully roasted and caramelized now. I'm going to fish out the vegetables, add them to the broth gently. I'm going to get all that fat out of the hotel pan and then I'm going to add some water to deglaze and I'm going to scrape up all those bits off the pan and just pour those into the stock pot. Then we can throw in a little bundle of thyme and rosemary, a bay leaf, and a handful of peppercorns. We want to again bring that up to a simmer and you're going to start to see all these particles start to come up again. And it's a little harder to skim now with all the vegetables in there, but as we see some of that scum rise up, we just want to go ahead and get rid of it. We're going to let that simmer for around 4 to 6 hours. After 6 hours, it should look like this. Then I'm going to get it off the heat, strain out the solids to a fine mesh strainer, and strain it into a smaller pot. Pour the rest of the broth in there, strain it all out, and get it back onto the stove. And as you're going to see, there's a layer of fat at the top of the broth. We're going to want to remove that. So I'm going to take a spoon and just start slowly getting that layer of fat out of there. And then we just want to boil this hard. And we want to reduce this all the way down until it becomes thicker. And every time you see any bit of foamy scum accumulate at the surface, you just want to scoop that out, clean it up real nice. And we want to reduce this until it's about a quarter of its original volume. You can see the lines on the side of the pan. It helps you decide how far you've reduced it. Also by the thickness of it. It should be a lot thicker than it was. The smell should be more intense and aromatic. Once it's there, you should be left with about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of the stock. You want to get that into a bowl, let it cool. Now the quality of this stock is undeniable and it's prepped to make a sauce, which means it's reduced down, slightly thickened. It's going to thicken a little bit more when we cook it. This is going to make an incredible sauce. However, if you wanted to, you could avoid doing that and use a good quality beef broth like this. I'd maybe get 2 of these, reduce them down, they'll thicken. This is like a real commercial product made the way that you just saw me make it. This is found in the freezer aisle because it spoils, because it's real, and it's a little bit more expensive. But if you want to avoid that process to get this quality, you have to pay for it. But you cannot use a box for this. You could, but it's just not going to be good and you're going to judge my recipe when you could have just made it yourself. So no box. Now we'll set that off to the side. And now the whole centerpiece of steak au pois is the peppercorn steak. So what I'm going to do is just get a few handfuls in here and just grind them up. A Moro and pestle is great, but you can use a Ziploc bag in a pan. But I'm just gonna start cracking them. And then once they're slightly cracked, I'm gonna just start to grind and twist them and just work it around the mortar and pestle until the peppercorns are sort of grinded down to about 1/4 of their original size. I'm gonna pour the peppercorns into a plate. Then I'm gonna take the steak. And you see how we have this really nice, flat, dried out surface that has been facing up? The bottom side's a little less perfect. So that's the side that I wanna coat in the peppercorn. And I'm gonna press that steak into the peppercorn so that that imperfect side of the beef gets entirely coated on that one side in peppercorns. Now for the sauce, since we have all that heat from the fresh cracked black pepper, I'm gonna use these green peppercorns in brine. They're like black pepper, but everything about it is milder. And they're in the brine, so there's a little salt to it. Now we got our peppercorns for the sauce. We've got our dried cracked peppercorn crusted steak ready. We've got our perfect beef stock / demi-glaze. We've got about 1/4 cup of heavy cream, maybe a hefty 1/4 cup. And then we're gonna need some cognac. Now, cognac is a type of brandy. It sort of just adheres to higher standard qualities, so it's a little bit better, I guess. I'm not a Hennessy cognac drinker, so I only keep a small little bottle like this on hand whenever I need it for cooking. And this is all we're really gonna need, except a little bit of salt to adjust the seasoning at the end. And now for this recipe, we're going to be using the 10-inch carbon steel frying pan from our longtime sponsor, Made In. And if you're looking to get started using carbon steel for your cooking, Made In's got you covered. Made In designs professional quality products for the home cook, and they partner with multi-generational factories and artisans to offer what I think is one of the most comprehensive collections of pots, pans, serveware, and everything else you need to cook and serve food in the home kitchen. And their carbon steel collection has it all, including the 8-inch, the 10-inch, and the 12-inch frying pan, a pizza steel, a paella pan, a roasting pan, and a wok. It's the perfect hybrid of a cast iron pan and a stainless steel frying pan. It heats quickly, it's half the weight of a cast iron, it's just as durable, it's easy to move from stovetop to the oven where it can handle up to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, which also makes it perfect for outdoor cooking. And just like a cast iron pan, the more you use the carbon steel, the more seasoned it gets and eventually becomes naturally non-stick. This is the one I'll be using today. And because Maiden loves my audience, they're offering a 10% off discount on all of their products when you use my link down in the description.
That's why I don't clean my grills, jack-offs.
And now we can get the steak seared. Now get the carbon steel pan on medium high to high heat, and then we're gonna add a touch of oil, not too much, and just coat the bottom of the pan. And we get the steak in peppercorn side facing up. And I'm just gonna press that into the pan, and I like to offset it off to the side, the hotter part of the pan. And I'm gonna leave it alone. It's going to stick to the pan, and as long as it sticks, I'm not gonna touch it. I'm gonna let it cook for about 4 minutes, and as soon as it will release naturally from the pan, and it has a beautiful sear just like this, I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna toast that other side. But since those peppercorns sort of raise the meat slightly above the pan, I'm gonna add a little bit more oil, and I'm also gonna sort of brown that side with the pan slightly tilted, just so I can brown the edges of that steak and get that side nicely caramelized. Once those peppercorns are nicely toasted and the steak is browned on that side, we're gonna flip it, place it back on that wire rack, and place it in a 400-degree oven for about 15 to 20 minutes while we make our sauce. Now wipe that pan out and then get it back onto the stove, and I'm just gonna sprinkle maybe a teaspoon of the fresh cracked black peppercorn into the pan to toast for like 30 seconds. Then I'm gonna take that Hennessy, I'm gonna turn the heat off on the pan, and I'm gonna add about a quarter cup of the Hennessy and allow that to deglaze. Once it stops spitting, you can turn the heat back on, and you can use your nose to smell if the alcohol's burned off. Once the alcohol doesn't burn the nostrils anymore, it's a
I could log off. I really could. But, guess I'd rather just shower y'all with gifts. Anyway, I'll be back. And, yeah. I'll be back.
evaporated out. And when it's nice and reduced and bubbly like this, then we can go ahead and add in our beef demi-glaze or the beef stock that's been reduced. Then we can add those green peppercorns, the cream, stir it all together, and then reduce. We're gonna reduce this down.
Oh. Alright. This is the old unthinkable burger. Alright, finally here.
This episode of Google Foods is brought to you by Oscar Mayer. These are hot dogs, and by the end of today's video, you will never look at one the same way again. The most common way to have a delicious hot dog is quite simple. Boil some water, throw them in there for a few minutes, grab a bun, open it up, insert your hot dog right in the middle, add some condiments like ketchup and mustard, and there you have it. The classic
The most common way for a hot dog is open them up, grill, condiments, eat, whatever.
hot dog. Now this is amazing just like this, but some people like to break rules. Adding mayo to a hot dog for some is just wrong. But hey, today we're gonna take wrong to a whole new level. As today I'll be experimenting with these hot dogs and making something incredible. And here's how. First, I needed to find out the best hot dogs for this experiment. As you know, there's one thing that I love more than anything else, and that is beef. These new Oscar Mayer 100% beef franks are delicious. It is hard to put it in words, but since beef is kind of my thing, I'm gonna try to explain how good they are in this video, as I'm gonna be making smash burgers out of it. And in order to do that, the first thing I gotta do is to find out the best texture. Whenever you make a burger, texture is quite important. So I went ahead and diced some 100% beef franks finely just like this, and another one I threw it in the food processor, blend everything on high, and in the end I was left with something quite similar to extremely fine ground beef, fully seasoned and with all the spices needed. These Oscar Mayer 100% beef franks use a unique spice blend including onions, garlic, and smoke to make it more flavorful. And now I gotta find out which one is better, chunky or finely ground. I went ahead, got a skillet and put it in there and started to cook. I went ahead and put some American cheese right on top. Then I covered it up hoping that the cheese will hold everything together. But as soon as I took it out, look, the cheese combining everything together did not work at all. I think it would be perfect for another type of sandwich, something like a Philly cheesesteak or something. But for a burger, it's just not gonna hold together well. At the same time, I'm not gonna lie, it is delicious. Combining it with cheese is just on another level. But since for a burger that was not the best option, I went ahead and went with the second one. I threw a ball right in the middle of the pan, added some parchment paper, and smashed it up like a regular smash burger. And as soon as I removed the paper, I knew that this was gonna work. The only real thing that was quite important was to ensure that I got a crust. After about 2 minutes, I went ahead and started to scrape the edges, and he immediately went in for the flip. And as soon as I did, I thought, oh no, I think it's way too charred and possibly even burned. But I wanted to taste it anyway, so I added some American cheese right on top, covered it up, and let it melt. And this was working beautifully, because in the end, after putting it up on a plate, a closer look revealed that this was not burned at all. Nicely charred on the top, but in the middle was perfect. It was more like a very strong Maillard reaction, which is actually what makes burgers taste so good. But did I take it too far? The only way to find out was to taste. Wow. That was good. I had to immediately go in with some bread. I quickly threw it in on a bun and went in for my first bite, and oh boy, this thing is delicious. It's nice and soft, a little bit of crispiness because of the crust, and whatever it is that happened when I did that, it created an incredible flavor and texture on a hot dog that I've never had before. This was really good. But at the same time, there's one thing that we always need on a good burger, and that is a sauce. I decided to make it really classic and simple one. I started with a good amount of mayo,
How are you? Welcome to my Italian kitchen again. This is the Frugal Gourmet talking about red meats in Italy. In our country, we eat bigger chunks of meat at a single meal. In Italy, they are more likely to take a smaller amount of meat and cook it in such a way that it is so rich it'll nearly kill you. But it's a wonderful way to cook. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. Red meats, primarily from the north. Though Craig has a dish from Sicily that's going to knock your socks off. So sit down, grab your notebook, and let's start cooking beef, veal, and pork. Now, Italian meat shops are very different from our own. In Italy, Italian shops, meat shops are just gorgeous. You can wander through any major city. This is Turin. Look at these places. The meat is hanging outside the cases. That's our health department would scream bloody murder, but in Italy it's perfectly all right. And it's very fresh. They move stuff in a hurry. In the north, he eat a lot of meat. This market in Turin, he has a goat leg there that he's weighing out. And of course, the lovely city of Florence, Firenze. They're very fond of innards there. I hope you saw us do innards. But their public market, right here in the middle of the city, right near the cathedral, is just a lovely, lovely place. You can buy all sorts of meats there, and you can buy creatures that have just recently been killed and are still whole, rabbits and pheasants, all sorts of things. Now, in the fancy markets, this one, look out, Smith, you're going to faint. This, look at the prices on that. That's 24,000 lira for a kilo. Oh boy, that's that's very expensive veal. But that was a wonderful place, and this is Peck's. Now watch this. We go in there and start looking around. These are all cured meats in Milan, very near the cathedral again. A lovely, lovely place. And these Parma hams, there's a whole piggy if you want to take that home. Craig is fascinated by the hams, and so am I. We decide to buy one, and when we take it to the gal in cash, she weighs it out, and she, how much is it? How much is it? I can't even remember. Look, she's embarrassed. Craig says, come on, get out of here, Smith. And away we go. I'm talking costly. Look at her now. She can look at she's so sweet. At Crystal Meats, this place has been in business, you can see, since 1947. This is down on the Pike Place Public Market in Seattle. And this is where Craig and I buy all of the meats that we use on our shows and that we use. This is Dolores.
What's on sale today?
Craig's trying to talk her out of a sale for the day, and she says, no, look at the board. She's one of the owners. She and her husband own the place. Don't you wish you had a butcher that gorgeous? Look at the case she has. That's the kind of thing that she does.
Fuck you,
Wonderful,
1980s
wonderful
prices.
Look at them all. And they make their own sausage. Chickens are skinned and ready for you. They're wonderful, wonderful people. So it's lots of fun to go there. I love a good meat market. I don't understand something that is wrapped up in a piece of saran wrap and you can't pick it up and smell it or poke it or look at it in the glass case, you see. Tough way to go. First of all, meatballs. Of course I'm going to make meatballs, but I want to show you a method that's a little bit different. There's a fellow in Philadelphia by the name of Cruniti. There's a whole bunch of people in Philadelphia by the name of Cruniti, but he runs a restaurant, a Sicilian restaurant, and this is the way he makes meatballs. Very different. First of all, I need 6 cups of old bread, big cubes, you see, and I've soaked this in water, and I want to drain the water out of this. See how that mess? See how that is? All right, so we squeeze the water out of this, and I'm going to put that into the meat mixture. Now, I better show you the meat mixture first. Here it is. The meat mixture consists of 6 cups of dried bread cubes. We're going to pour that in there. Now, here you have 1 pound of veal.
Oh yeah, Frugal Gourmet is 80s, early 90s.
This is 1 pound of ground pork butt. This is a ½ pound of beef chuck. And this is 1/3 of a pound of pork fat. Pork fat? Yes, of course, because you have to have some moisture in the thing, you see? And the pork fat will do that. It's going to drain, don't worry about it. So we'll squeeze out the breadcrumbs. And this will lighten it up. I've ground the meat on fine, on my meat grinder. All right, Smith, don't take everybody's daytime to squeeze out all this bread. But anyhow, you're going to put in the whole works. And here are the rest of the ingredients. I now want to add to my 4 meats, actually, 4 meats in the breadcrumbs, bread cubes. I want to add a third of a cup of onion all chopped up. This is yellow onion, and I want to add some cheese, about 4 tablespoons of freshly grated Parmesan or Reggiano cheese. Don't use that cheap stuff in a little box, remember? We've talked about that, so it's just an awful thing to do. I need some garlic, a couple cloves of chopped garlic, and I've already chopped this before you came. There we are. And then I need some dried marjoram, about a ½ teaspoon. You don't want much. Marjoram is sort of has a kind of a mild flavor of it's similar to oregano, I think. And I need 3 whole eggs, beaten. There, isn't that thrilling? There it is. That pretty much does it, I think. I need some parsley, about 2 tablespoons, 1, 2, and I need some salt. And you can vary the salt so that if you're on a salt-free diet, don't put much in. I want a couple teaspoons, 1, 2. There we go. And some pepper, about a teaspoon will do. Teaspoon will be plenty. That's it. There we go. I love pepper. If you're trying to cut down on salt and fat in your diet, jack up your diet with spices. They're very good for you. And a little white wine. I've told you that before, of course. Now then, here's the fun part. You mix all of this up, all of the meats. And you see, normally you could mold this into a loaf right now, or you could make it into balls. But you know what he does? This is very interesting. He grinds it a second time so that the texture that you wind up with is almost like a sausage. It's very finely ground, closer to a sausage than to anything else. So I'm going to put probably half of this batch into my food processor. I've got a big one here. And we're just going to grind the blazes out of this stuff. Oh, in each batch, you grind it in 2 batches and put about a tablespoon of olive oil in the batch just to get the machine rolling nicely. 1 tablespoon of olive oil. There you go. And we'll grind her up. Let her fly.
Of course, God forbid you release any of the pork on the top of your grinder.
That's plenty.
Or
You
your
see, what
food
we have
processor,
now
which
is a very different texture for a meatball. It's not totally ground like the center of a weenie. It's coarser than that. But it's certainly much softer than the kind of meatballs you and I normally make. Wet your hands when you roll these, and then they won't stick. This will make about 35 meatballs. And what you do is to put the meatballs on a tray. If I'm working in a hurry, I take this out of here, of course, but I use an ice cream scoop, you see? Roll it out. If your hand's wet, this won't stick at all. Pile them onto a tray. You want to make about 35 of these. And then we're going to put them in the oven and roast them for a bit. We're going to roast them at 375 degrees for 25 minutes. The result is a cooked meatball, of course. I've had these out of the oven for a bit. And I've also got some others in the oven. You see, I've stolen some from them. See how nice these are? Now, you can serve them just like this. They're done enough to serve. But this is what Mr. Criniti does. And I think this is just terrific. Here we go. A dish, a meatball or 2, and he cuts them in half and lays them side down in the dish. Cuts them in half and then tops the dish with tomato sauce and mozzarella cheese.
All right, I thought I had enough for a second stream. I don't. Good night, everybody.